Welcome to the section of my channel where I present you budget decks. The decks will be playable, somewhat competitive, but don't expect to top any event with them. In this format, the decks will not cost more than 50 to 80 bucks, and I'll really try to stick to it. And today I will be presenting you Metaphys. It's one of my favorite decks from compared to what it costs to actually how good it is, because I feel like this whole category, I'll actually implement this category. So you have a deck that you can pick up easily, you don't have to spend too much money on it. Even though it doesn't cost that much, it can still play. Like if you mainly play Yu-Gi-Oh against friends, or you want to take a deck to locals and you don't want to spend a lot on it, or in general, if you're just starting out Yu-Gi-Oh! Or want to pick up a deck that isn't too complicated, doesn't cost too much maybe, and this is the right format for you, and especially the right deck, because the main deck is like really cheap. I've done the math and talking about the price first. The main deck you'll be getting around like 10 bucks max, like really 10 bucks max, because the cards basically cost nothing. What can be like if some of the floodgates can be a bit more expensive, so you might get up to 15 with the more expensive cards. If you cut in like the main extra deck card that you need in the deck at least once, you'll probably be like around 20 bucks maximum, really, like what I feel like or what I calculated. And then you can fill up the extra deck with other kind of link cards that you want to. You can fill it up with rank 4 cards if you already played Yu-Gi-Oh before and you have some rank 4s. So all in all, the deck is really cheap. You can obviously put some more expensive cards in it. You can like swap effect veil, or can add instead of the solemn cards, for example, you can add better hand traps. Infinite impermanence is always a good thing in the deck, because you want to go second with the deck. So like talking about the playstyle, what the deck basically does is you don't really rely on your extra deck. You can go into it, and everybody knows filling up your extra deck, unless you have restrictions that you really shouldn't, is always a good thing. So even if you don't really go into it, it's good to have those options. And I'll present you with some, but they are not as important. You can basically do whatever you have and want to do. But all you do with this deck is basically you try to banish as many cards as possible face up, because if face down they don't get their effects. They get their effects, then you basically do your things around the standby phase of your opponent or on your own standby phase. And why you want to go second and not first as you'd think is because the effects trigger on your opponent's standby phase, or like any standby phase. But if you go first, it triggers on your opponent's standby phase before he has done something. So all the effects of cards, like very strong cards like Daedalus, that if you special summon him with the monster effect of a Metaphys monster, then you can basically banish all special summoned monsters. I feel it's non-targeting, non-destruction removal, which is very strong, very disruptive. But the problem is you can't do that if you go first turn, because your opponent in his standby phase will not have a board. Sadly, the meta these days is kind of hard going second, because they will have so many negates, which you can't play through some of them. If your opponent only has monster negates, then Metaphys Factor, for example, is a quite neat card, but I'll come to that later. But let's just start out with the deck, and I'll explain why maybe going second is kind of a good thing, and I explain some, I don't know, interesting tech choices that I have, and you might enjoy the deck profile. So first of all, I try to run every one of the big Metaphys monsters, or at least basically every one of the Metaphys monsters besides the Decoy Dragon at 3, because you need a lot of Metaphys cards, and the more you have in the deck, the more likely you'll be able to banish them, because it's kind of a luck thing sometimes if you mill the right cards with the cards like Ragnarok or even Necrophase. But you'll have a higher chance if you have more cards in your deck, simple math. Metaphys Tyrant Dragon, it's a good card to banish, because you can banish a card you can special summon a monster from your hand in the standby phase after. But it's okay if you attack, like it can attack multiple monsters. It's I think unaffected by trap cards, which doesn't come up too much, because battle traps are not really a thing anymore. But still being able to dodge some Ultrageist pop cards, or maybe Salmon Great pop cards, could be quite nice. That is sometimes helpful. For backrow removal, you have Metaphys Nethys. Thing is, they could usually respond to it unless you have your field spell on the field. So your field spell is kind of important if you're playing against backrow heavy decks, because then you can actually nuke them before they can do something, if they don't get rid of Metaphys Factor before. So when it's special summoned, you banish all set spell and trap cards on the field. Only set ones. This is kind of a little bit sad, because if it would be all of them, would be kind of neat and probably more helpful, because you don't have that much removal for cards that are face up on the field. That's when you have to kind of side deck and rely on your trap card a little bit more. Daedalus already explained, nukes your whole fields, kind of neat. If you shuffle him into, if you banish him, you can banish another card, which also, since the card is out, you can banish the trap card, for example, so you can get Surge. With Nethys, you will get Surge also, so you'll Surge quite a lot. A newcomer in this deck that I thought after the ban list, oh, the deck's not going to be as playable anymore because Gold Sagas at 1. But with the Aloof Lupin, they gave us kind of an option of what you can do now. Like, it's not, I'm very glad this card didn't get like really expensive because Thunder Dragon players might be playing it and so on. But this card is actually very neat if you have a Metaphys monster in your hand, which you mainly will have, and if not, you'll be able to search it. Sadly, it's like a normal summon and it's not a Metaphys monster, so it can't be easily negated. Still, it is a good card, and it kind of compensates for not having all gold socks anymore. So technically, we won one card with getting this card, but losing 2 gold socks. But it would be still better if you had 3 gold socks, don't get me wrong. The level 4 Method Ragnarok, that you basically kind of want to start off your plays with this card a little bit. You can sometimes summon him during your opponent's turn to set up to your turn to nuke your opponent's field in your turn. Then if you summon him, because if he's normal or special summoned, you can banish the top 3 cards of your deck face up. Doesn't say, but that's what it is. And attack, like the card gains attack. You could run Honest in the deck to like proc the effect. If you deal battle damage with this card, then you can special summon more monsters from your deck, which gets the Daedalus more often. But sometimes your disruption anything is good enough to at least run over one of the link monsters, the weaker monsters that your opponent has, if you like banish 1 or 2 Metaphys cards. So it could be enough. But if you're playing against people that you don't have to disrupt as much, where you don't have to be as floodgatey, then maybe switch the effect veilers to Honest or some of the solemn cards maybe, and you will be fine. I still run 1 Necrophase. Point is, Necrophase isn't as good in this deck anymore because Gold Sagas at 1. That was basically your only way of getting Necrophase, unless you played Summoner Monk and you wanted to run Allure of Darkness, which you could still do. You could still play with Summoner Monk and Allure of Darkness, since you have the Allure of Lupin, which is dark as well. But I didn't think it was that good of a build with Summoner Monk because it's quite disruptible and then you stand there without anything. So that's quite neat. But there's another card that I'll talk about in a second that actually could get a Necrophase off. So I really like that. I run double Decoy Dragon. Decoy Dragon is a strong card. You can make your opponent like not be able to attack you in a sense if they don't get rid of this card. A lot of the time, like, if they can read the effect, they will probably not attack you, but at least they could kind of save you, and it's another Metaphys monster in your deck, so I want to run it at 2. You play triple effect veil because it's a budget, it's quite relevant, but quite a budget hand trap, and if you want to go second, you at least have to run 1 hand trap. I kind of wish I could run some kaijus in this deck, or have more access to like better hand traps, but it does okay in like non-hardcore competitive environment, and Metaphys, however you build them, it's going to be hard to stand up to decks like Thunder Dragons or like Tricidia Guard Dragons at the moment. One of my tech choices that I run in this deck, I don't see everybody running it, so like I don't know how comfortable I feel like calling it my tech choice, but I actually do like the card a lot, is Shuffle Reborn. You don't want to max out on it because it can be bricky if you draw 2, or if you draw it first turn, it's not as good. You have to have a card in the graveyard, and usually you want to banish things, but there will be Metaphys cards in your graveyard. They will be destroyed by battle, there will be like their summon negated or their effect negated and destroyed, so there will be cards in your graveyard, which then you can special summon a monster, which doesn't really matter, you don't have the effect, but you have a monster on field, which can be quite neat sometimes to run over things. But also, you can banish this card from graveyard, target 1 card you control, shuffle into the deck, which can be quite nice. If you have too many cards, you can always get your Metaphys monsters back into the deck, because you kind of want them in the deck to banish them sometimes, or like draw them to them. Then you can draw 1 card, plus during the end phase of the turn you can banish 1 card from your hand, which is quite neat. Also, if your monster doesn't get killed, then you can banish it during the end phase, the one that you summoned from the graveyard. Also good, so you have like 2 cards banished from this card, get like somewhat, that's not a free draw because you kind of have to send 1 card back, but it can help you like shuffle through your deck a little bit and get cards banished. So I really like this card, and when it comes up for me, it actually always was helpful. I want 1 Crossbreed. The problem with Crossbreed is that you have to start 2 monsters, which happens sometimes. You can bump this card up to 2 and put Shuffle Reborn back to 1 if you want to, but I felt like Shuffle Reborn was in most of the cases more helpful than Crossbreed, especially when you have like Allure of Lupin as well, and you can't really get off both effects, because that would mean you would have started with an only monster hand, which it's not happening all that often because you run basically like only half of the deck is monsters, so it will be somewhat about like 3 cards to 4 cards in your starting hand. There will be monsters most of the time, so it can brick sometimes because, you know, math is a bitch in that sense. I run one gold sark. You can banish basically everything. That's one way to get into Necrophase if you draw the gold sarcophagus before Necrophase. Another way to get Necrophase off is actually Shuffle Reborn, because you can banish it from your hand after you activate the effect, which then obviously triggers the Necrophase effect, which can be quite neat. But you have to watch out with Necrophase against Thunder Dragons, because you kind of make them pop off a little bit if they banish the right cards with it. So maybe slide Necrophase out when you're playing against Thunder Dragons. I run obviously Triple S Metaphys. It's like the most expensive Metaphys main deck card, with about like maximum of $1 or something, I guess. It's not expensive at all, but it's the only card that's I think an ultra rare. Also, I have to say, like, they're all at least like super rares and ultra rares, so the deck looks kind of neat in sleeves. That's what I feel like I have to mention here. And it's a good draw engine. You get a card banished, you also get a draw. Mainly you could get it off search if you banish the trap card, for example, or banish another copy of itself if you have too much. You can basically recycle cards that you can search or whatever to actually get searched off to draw into cards that you may like maybe need more. The other effects sound kind of ridiculous, but they permanently lose the attack. So if you do it like twice or something, they can stack up and can help you get over cards with Ragnarok, for example. So it's not completely useless. You obviously have floodgates like Dimensional Fissure, because like banishing your monster when they go into the graveyard can help you. Plus it shuts down a lot of your opponent's decks. Metaphys Factor is a really important card at the moment, I feel, especially with so many monster gates being around, because like all the danger cards and like basically monsters make out like 75-80% of most decks these days, if not even more. So a lot of people focus on monster negates. So Metaphys Factor can be quite helpful, unless it's against stuff like Azathoth, because it's not an activated thing. Like, you'll just not be able to activate your monster effect. But Metaphys Factor, actually, you can normal summon a monster without tributing. Can be neat to either run it into stuff if you have like Dimensional Fissure on the field and want to banish a card, or to run over things, because your monster have sometimes quite high attack, especially Tyrant Dragon with 2,900 without like just normal summoning it can be helpful. But on the other hand, the more important thing with it is your opponent can activate cards or effects in response to Metaphys monster activation. So that is, if you have this card open and your opponent is playing like stuff like Ultrageist and like trap cards, and he didn't negate the Metaphys Factor somehow, then you can just Nethys' whole back rows like against Dracos and stuff like this can be really neat. Actually destroy them a lot, because they all get banished, which is pretty neat then. Then you trap card Method of Ascension. Sometimes it's helpful if you get the effect off, like if you want to set up maybe for Shuffle Reborn next turn, discarding a Metaphys monster can be quite neat. You get the monster banished if you use this effect, so you can set up for the next turn, like during your opponent's turn you'll get a draw, and then during your turn you'll get the effect of the banished monster. But a lot of the time you want to use it to like search a card to your hand. You want to mainly add like Ragnarok or Daedalus if you want to set up if you have Tyrant Dragon banished. But there's a lot of stuff that you can do, and it's a very situational deck in total. One Macrocosmos, basically the same as Dimensional Fissure in that sense, shuts down a lot of decks, quite helpful. I ran double Metaphys Dimension. A lot of people don't like the trap card, but I actually came to like it a lot, because if you can drag out the duel a little bit, and this is what the Metaphys definitely tried to do, then this comes up quite handy. It's your spell trap card removal, it's your disruption tool basically. And you can do so much, especially with the help of Daedalus' effect, because you then can banish another Metaphys monster, trigger the effect of this card, banish a card on the field. The special summon effect doesn't come out that much. Why I run it twice, even though it's searchable, is that if it gets banished, there's not a good chance of you getting it back ever again. So making sure that you have it twice so you can search it at the beginning somewhat is kind of essential. Even though it's a go second deck, I still run 2 solemn cards, because your first turn isn't that hard. Your opponent will still have to react to what you do in their turn, so having 2 solemn cards backing that up, or like making it harder for him to like get his board back after you nuked it with Daedalus, can be quite neat. For the extra deck, you definitely want to run like at least one Metaphys Horse. You can negate card effects, you can steal a monster, can be quite neat. Doesn't come up too much, but with Decoy Dragon being able to special summon it and Ragnarok banishing it, it can happen, so it's quite a neat card. You could go for one Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend, but that's just my choice. It's a cheap card, and you could make it with a Lupin and Metaphys Ragnarok. Technically, that's how you basically go into all your rank 4s. So that's just standard choices that can be helpful. Tornado Dragon to make like, you don't have much spell trap card removal, so that could be quite helpful. Baguska is classic plan B if you can't do anything. Just put it down and wait how your opponent responds to it. Cheapest link 4 basically, that's still somewhat useful in the deck. Topological Bomber Dragon, even though you'll not be going into it that much, because you won't have a field that high unless you stall out your opponent quite a lot. Deco Talker can be quite nice to protect cards. Unicorn, obviously, spin back cards. what's pretty good from a Phoenix and Cerberus. They're somewhat affordable, so I would at least go for those two in the deck. It can be quite neat. Or one Underclock Taker if you really need that zone and kind of want to maybe get the effect of like your Ragnarok off with like lowering your opponent's monsters' attack points. If you ever feel like you want to go more for go first version, or in general feel like your opponent plays a lot of hand traps, you could cite in Caught by the Grave. If you have Dark or Rageki going second, that can be quite helpful as well. If you don't want to go for the Solemn cards, you want to break a board, but then you could also play Sphere Mode and so on, which is probably a little bit stronger than easy negatable destruction card. If Ghost Ogre ever comes up and it's a little bit cheaper, you could run that. Twin Twister helps a lot against back row decks, and you could even play floodgatey stuff like Goes and Match. Could be kind of annoying sometimes with stuff like Lupine and the Necroface being a dark monster in comparison to everybody else being a light monster, but it would still work and you would find a way around it, so that would not be the problem. I was talking about it, it's quite a stally deck. It's not meant to stall, but it drags out the duels a lot if you don't get like punished within the first few turns because you're playing against 5 negates. Budget decks barely ever manage to play against 5 negates. So that's just the thing. If you're playing with like in a budget friendly environment, you'll not be playing against a lot of decks that put up 5 negates, except it's pendulums maybe. But that is another topic. And other than that, I think the deck is quite a lot of fun. You have quite a lot of play potential, but on the other hand, it's not too complicated. So if you're kind of new to Yu-Gi-Oh, you don't have a lot of extra deck shenanigans that you have to know. It's basically just normal monster effect focused, so you can even get into it with basic knowledge of the game. And it's quite easy to handle. It's not too complicated. You have to kind of keep track of which effects activate when, which can be quite a hassle in real life. But you'll get behind this eventually, and it is really fun to play. Plus, it can show up in competitive play a little bit. If you make some adjustments, put some more expensive cards, and maybe make it a little bit more of a floodgate deck, this deck can actually show up big time. And I think it even topped like one minor event at one point somewhat, which quite a weird build if I might say, but I actually enjoy the deck a lot, and the $20 or whatever you have to invest to get this deck are totally worth it. I would definitely do it anytime again. Next deck that I'll be reviewing is the Harpy deck, so be excited for that. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than this one, but it's quite hard to make a cheaper deck than Metaphys, to be completely honest. That is on the same level in my opinion. But if you want to stay tuned, give it a like, give it a follow, do whatever you feel like, and I hope you have a good day.